On day 6 of April of the year 2000, in the town of Kettering, Northamptonshire, Sarah Benford, a 14-year-old, entered a games room in Kettering town centre to see her mother. Sarah and her mother had a brief discussion, and the conversation ended with Sarah telling her mother that she would see her the next day. That was the last time Vicki Benford saw her little girl. At the time of that argument, teenager Sarah Benford was 5 feet 7 inches tall, had blue-green eyes, and had a characteristic tattoo amateur of a cross on her left upper arm. She was wearing dark blue patchwork-style jeans, an orange fleece, a black quilted jacket, cream trainers, and was carrying a navy blue and green rucksack. Today, does more of 24 years that his whereabouts are unknown.
Crimes and mysteries.
The disappearance of Sarah Benford. Sarah Benford was born on March 19, 1986, and spent the early years of her life living with her mother Vicki, her stepfather Gavin, her brother Josh, and her sister Anya on Havelock Street, a modest street made up mainly of brick terraced houses located in the town of Kettering, Northamptonshire. The city is just over 80 miles north of London, and according to the 2011 census, has a population of around 64,000 people. It is said Sarah appeared for the first time on the radar of social services at the age of just 2 years. Between the ages of 4 and 5, Sarah had begun skipping school, and by the age of 8, she had also begun running away from home. Sarah began attending Montague School, which was located on Glebe Road, at the age of 11. She was described as a confident and cheerful child. However, sadly, her lack of school attendance and behavioral problems continued. The death of her uncle Andy, in 1999, is said to have had a profoundly negative effect on the teenager's mental state, as the two were very close. After that, Sarah began taking drugs of all kinds, and associating with a number of local burglars and drug users, all much older than her. By the time was 14, she had already been in 3 different children's homes, had started using heroin, cocaine and speed, inhaling aerosols and self-harming, running away from his foster home regularly. Her mother Vicki had accepted that she enter in a foster home because wanted to keep her away from the petty thieves of Kettering, who often sent her out to rob, to feed their drug habits. Police investigation. Those who were investigating her disappearance, those in charge of caring for her and the media, said Sarah had resorted to the prostitution, and implied she was a teenager who had run away to mix with the wrong crowd and take hard drugs. They also declared that if Sarah Benford had disappeared today, illuminated by knowledge gained from years of high-profile child sexual exploitation, and a paradigm shift in how society views the grooming of children, the Sarah with baby-faced would be seen for what she was: a victim of sex crimes by older men who wanted to exploit her, a victim of those who served their own interests by supplying her with drugs, and a victim of the many caregivers who repeatedly failed her. Long before she disappeared, authorities would wonder what had gone so terribly wrong in Sarah's life that had led her down this catastrophic path. What had affected her so much that she spent 41 of the 150 days she was under guardianship without being in her foster home? And where did she sleep on the nights she spent away from her foster home? Questions would be asked, investigations would be launched, and arrests would be made. But in the year 2000, police officers were so unconcerned by Sarah Benford's multiple escape attempts that on the day the girl disappeared, they refused to pick her up from a house in Kettering, despite her desperate mother's pleas. The publicity surrounding her disappearance was in stark contrast to the huge coverage given to the brilliant teenager Sussex Millie Dowler in 2002, who disappeared and was later found tragically murdered. Outside Kettering, Sarah Benford's name was barely known. In 2008, Sarah's uncle, Steve Cross, deeply angry and distraught, told the Independent newspaper, "From the beginning, the police did not treat the case with a sufficient seriousness. Sarah was just another statistic to social services and the police, and at first, They didn't care. Then, with pressure from the family through the media, they thought, we better do something about it, because this is not going to go away. There is a culture of secrecy when children go missing from foster homes. Sarah had been in care for just a few months before disappearing for the last time. She went to live in her first foster home in September 1999, after the death of her beloved uncle Andy. Unable to cope with his death, she began hanging out with older people in Kettering and taking all kinds of drugs. She spent time in Raven House Children's Home in Corby, and then in a Northamptonshire County Council-run isolation and security unit called St. John's in Tiffield, later described by another former resident as a place of care for anyone who had nowhere else to go. Sarah was transferred to Welford House Children's Home in Northampton. There, at just 13 years old, she self-harmed and admitted to meeting boys from Abington Park to have sex, revealing to the staff that she was injecting heroin. When she told staff about the boys she was having sex with, they simply reminded her to use contraceptives. A doctor she visited in hospital, after she had taken heroin, said he could find nothing wrong with her. Her mother would later say that Sarah was desperate to get out of the house, and described the place as a holiday camp, which allowed her to come and go as she pleased. On 31 March of the year 2000, Sarah abandoned the unit and was reported missing. Notes from staff at the time said that, when they found Sarah Benford on 2 April, she confessed to having had sexual relations with men. It is not known whether the police ever made a report on Sarah's statement. She was just a child, and could not give her full consent to these men. Just one day later, on April 3rd, Sarah left the house again, and the staff again reported her missing. On April 6th, she visited her mother who worked at a playroom in Kettering Town Centre. They argued, and that was the last time Vicki would see her daughter. That same day, Sarah called her mother from a house in Hampton Crescent, Kettering. According to her mother, the girl sounded like she was drugged. Vicki, completely desperate, called the police and begged them to pick her up and take her back to the foster residence. But the police refused, and not for the first time. Given that the girl had been officially missing for 3 days, documents later provided to the newspaper said that police officers had told staff at the foster home that they were unwilling and unable to pick her up, and that they would not take her to the Kettering police station to take care of her. Over time, that decision has led to the largest missing persons investigation in the history of Northamptonshire Police, which has lasted more than 20 years. 5,000 lines of investigation have been opened, 663 statements taken, 918 reports compiled, and 8 arrests made. But, crucially, no charges have been laid. There were a few sightings in the days following her disappearance, in Cherry Road and Highfield Road. However, that is where the trail ends. The investigations carried out at the time suggested she had traveled to Finchley, London, where there were more people waiting to sexually exploit her, but no trace of her was ever found in that place. On May 12 of that same year, his grandmother June Black, of Ribblesdale Avenue, Corby, telephoned journalists from the Evening Telegraph, was feeling frustrated by attempts to find her granddaughter Sarah, so she herself asked for her return safe and sound. A reward was later offered of £500. Until her death in late 2003, June Black played a decisive role in maintaining pressure on the authorities to find her granddaughter Sarah. Her death coming just after her murder investigation had begun. On the day Sarah disappeared, she was dressed like a teenager from the years 90. A jacket padded black, blue patchwork jeans and cream trainers. Her mother, being devastated, scoured the streets and parks of Kettering looking for her for weeks. 4 months after she was last seen, in August of the year 2000, workers at Service 6 in Wellingborough said Sarah was accompanied twice by a pimp and a known prostitute to have a pregnancy test. Service 6 bosses reported that sighting to the police. Officials later said they believed there had been confirmed sightings of her up to April 19, but there was little evidence she was alive more than 2 or 3 months after she disappeared. Sarah's face appeared on milk cartons and the sides of trucks, There were appeals on television and media campaigns. There were 200 sightings that did not have any positive results. Existed the hope that a girl seen in the supervision store, in May of 2003 on Silver Street, was Sarah. But the police later ruled out that possibility. Past 3 long and anguishing years, for his heartbroken family. Until Derbyshire police were tasked with investigating shortcomings in the investigation by Northamptonshire police. Their report was never made public. In May of 2003, Northamptonshire County Council, perhaps conscious of its own shortcomings in handling Sarah's case, launched an independent inquiry into the police's handling of the case. Headed by Professor and Barrister Margaret Roberts, of Northampton University. However, the police refused to cooperate, claiming that it was not the remit of Northampton County Council to investigate the police. The investigation was later abandoned. But this, perhaps, was a catalyst for the police force to step up its investigation. One of the people the police investigated was Richard Jenkins, Jessica's father, who had been a friend of Sarah's. It was reported that the girl had been at his house several times during the year 2000 before disappearing, staying there for a pair of nights. In June of 2003, the police launched a thorough search in his former family home in Highfield Road. They thought Richard Jenkins had questions to answer. One of the places where Sarah was last seen on the day she disappeared was Highfield Road. Richard had moved to South Wales from Kettering, 18 months after Sarah disappeared. Detectives then moved to his new home in Maesteg, South Wales, where they dug up his garden to look for clues to Sarah's disappearance. In July of 2003, the Mr. Jenkins contacted reporters at the Evening Telegraph and told them that he had nothing to do with the case, that he did not believe Sarah was dead, and that he had no idea where she was. A journalist traveled to Wales to meet with him. There, in his living room, he said, "Neither I nor any of my daughters have seen Sarah since she went missing, and I can't understand why they are searching my house here, or in Kettering. This whole thing has really upset my youngest daughter, especially since she thinks I've been accused of killing someone, as does everyone who saw them digging in my garden. What am I supposed to have done? Did I kill Sarah, bury her, and dig her up 2 years later to move her to South Wales?" In July of 2003, was arrested by police and taken in for questioning. More later he declared reporters that the investigation had ruined his life. Finally, was eliminated from the investigation. Other 2 people from Kettering, a man of 29-year-old and a woman 37-year-old, were arrested on suspicion of supplying drugs to Sarah. 3 houses were searched, including one in Windmill Avenue. Officers visited Hackney to carry out searches of properties there. Finally, on September 23, 2003, the police said they had given up hope that Sarah was still alive, and elevated their investigation to search by murder. It was the news that Sarah's family had been dreading, but for them, the news did not dampen hope that the young woman was still alive. Chief Inspector Charles Moffat said, "There is little evidence that Sarah survived beyond 2 or 3 months after her disappearance." Were resumed the searches, were registered houses in Highfield Road and Nelson Street, and more arrests were made. A man from 54-year-old of Kettering, a man from 43-year-old and a from woman 38-year-old of London, were arrested on suspicion of murder. They were later released, and no charges were brought against them. Then, a woman 41-year-old from Kettering, was arrested on suspicion of murder. Later she was also released. A woman of 46-year-old from London, was arrested on suspicion of perverting the course of justice. Over time the independent investigation was abandoned, and replaced by a serious review of the case by the Area Child Protection Committee. In December, searches had moved to Weekley Woods, near Kettering, and Wakerley Woods, on the border of Rutland and East Northamptonshire. Nothing of interest was found during those searches. After from a time, officers began their most important search to that point. They headed to vacant land occupied by an elderly Pole, who was not implicated in the investigation. In the remote area of Findon Sidings, near the Furnace Lane Industrial Estate. The archaeologists were joined by cadaver dogs from Scotland and Greater Manchester, who were working alongside forensic officers. It was said that the place was important in Sarah's life. The agents took away 9 dilapidated caravans, 6 smashed cars, and countless bags full of scrap metal, which they took to a secret warehouse in Northampton to search for clues. A weapon was found, but it was not thought to be significant. Once again, their painstaking search proved fruitless. Conclusion of the case. 6 years later, on retirement, Chief Inspector Moffat would say that the biggest regret of his career was not finding Sarah. An analysis of the case that concluded in July of 2004 was damning. It found that Northamptonshire County Council was understaffed, that it missed several opportunities to identify Sarah as a child at risk, and that it failed to follow proper processes to ensure that the child came to no harm. The report said, professionals were operating with insufficient funding and resources, overstretched systems, huge workloads and a lack of comprehensive procedures. It also said, the label of troubled teenager masks and minimizes the risks faced by the vulnerable child. They concluded that no in-depth assessment of his needs was carried out before his disappearance. Despite problems with non-attendance at school from the age of 5, sexualized behavior from a young age, and suicide attempts, its 8 recommendations were based only on providing child protection training. Over time, Northamptonshire County Council reformed the way it dealt with children in its care. He made sure someone was available to pick up runaway children 24 hours a day, and trained his staff to spot signs of abuse. More social workers were hired, and police and social workers pledged to strengthen their ties so they could work together to care for troubled teens. Northamptonshire Police has radically overhauled its way of dealing with missing children. Immediate public appeals are now made when young people go missing, and a specialist team has been set up to prevent teenagers becoming involved with drug gangs. By August 2004, the trail over Sarah's whereabouts had gone cold, and the major investigation, dubbed Operation Yate, was scaled back. Then, in 2006, a concerned member of the public handed a file to a journalist. The article detailed the thoughts of the carers who looked after Sarah during the final months of her life at Welford House. It was devastating for Vicki Benford, the mother of Sarah, who tearfully told reporters that she should never have let her daughter go to a foster home. One heartbreaking entry shows how Sarah had been told that her biological father, with whom she was estranged, wanted to speak to her. But when carers called him, he said he wanted nothing to do with her. One section detailed how Sarah was found crying in another resident's room with her wrists cut. The next day, Sarah was allowed to go for an unsupervised walk around Kingsthorpe. She returned armed with a knife. At that moment, Vicki Benford declared,
"It's horrible. What were they thinking? The place was like a holiday camp. They let her come and go as she pleased. She was supposed to be in care. Sarah didn't want to be there. They promised her that if she went a month without running away, they would move her to Rockingham Dean, where she wanted to be. He behaved well, kept his end of the deal, only to be told he would have to stay where he was."
10 years later, in 2016, on what would have been Sarah's 30th birthday, officers revisited Dwarkton Forest to try and find clues. Detective Chief Inspector Martin Kinsheen, of the Cold Cases team, said the police force never gave up hope of finding out what happened to Sarah. Over the years, a number of top detectives have said they are confident they know who killed Sarah, but they need the help of the people of Kettering to find the evidence. Julie Gallagher from Northamptonshire Police's Cold Case team has been working on the investigation for the last 7 years, and today called on anyone with knowledge of Sarah's whereabouts to come forward to help Sarah's family to finally find some peace. Sarah Benford was 5 feet 7 inches tall, had blue-green eyes, and a self-made cross tattoo on her upper arm. Now he would be 38 years old. If you know anything about Sarah's murder that you think may assist the investigation, you can contact Detective Senior Constable Julie Gallagher directly by calling Northamptonshire Police on 101. To date, the case of Sarah Benford remains unsolved. Thank you all for making it to the end of the video. If you want, you can leave a comment and a like, so that the video reaches many more people. I send you all a big hug, and I hope you have a great day.